Arthur Henderson had sacrificed everything to raise his daughter Sarah alone after his wife died when Sarah was just 8 years old. The 67-year-old professor had worked double shifts, skipped vacations, and delayed his own dreams to ensure Sarah received the best education and opportunities. Now Sarah was repaying his decades of love and sacrifice by secretly filming a fake documentary that portrayed him as a demented old man, all so she could steal the $2.8 million estate he'd built for her future. This is the story of how a devoted single father discovered his daughter was using their most intimate conversations to build a legal case against him, and how he turned her own documentary footage against her to expose one of the most heartbreaking family betrayals imaginable. By the time Arthur was finished, Sarah faced criminal charges, and he had saved not only his estate, but dozens of other elderly parents from similar exploitation. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. You'll want to hear every detail of how Arthur's paternal love became his greatest vulnerability, and ultimately his most powerful weapon against the daughter who tried to destroy him. Arthur Henderson's life had been defined by a single moment of devastating loss, followed by 27 years of unwavering dedication. When his wife Margaret died suddenly of a brain aneurysm in 1984, Arthur found himself facing the impossible challenge of raising 8-year-old Sarah alone, while maintaining his position as an associate professor of American literature at the University of Colorado. "Daddy, when is Mommy coming home?" Sarah had asked that first terrible night, and Arthur had held her close, promising that he would be everything she needed: mother, father, and protector all rolled into one. For the next 2 decades, Arthur had kept that promise at enormous personal cost. While his colleagues pursued research sabbaticals, published books, and advanced their careers, Arthur chose every opportunity that kept him close to home. He turned down prestigious visiting professorships, declined research grants that required travel, and taught heavy course loads to ensure he could afford Sarah's private school tuition, music lessons, and college expenses. "Professor Henderson, you're one of the most brilliant literary minds I've ever encountered," his department chair had told him repeatedly. "You could have been running your own program at Harvard or Yale if you'd been willing to prioritize your career." But Arthur's priority had always been clear. Sarah came first, always and completely. He had attended every soccer game, every school play, every parent-teacher conference. When Sarah expressed interest in filmmaking during high school, Arthur had spent his entire summer salary buying her professional camera equipment. When she wanted to attend USC's prestigious film school, Arthur had taken out loans against his house to pay the tuition. "I want you to have every opportunity I never had," Arthur told Sarah during her high school graduation. "Your mother would be so proud of the woman you're becoming." By 2011, Arthur's sacrifices had produced exactly the results he'd hoped for. Sarah had graduated from USC with a master's degree in documentary filmmaking, worked for several production companies, and was building a reputation as a talented filmmaker specializing in social justice issues. At 35, she had won awards for her documentaries about homelessness, environmental activism, and educational inequality. Arthur had finally reached the point where his sacrifice was paying dividends. Sarah was successful and independent, his own career had stabilized with tenure and a respectable salary, and he had accumulated $2.8 million in retirement savings through decades of careful financial planning. "Dad, I'm so grateful for everything you gave up for me," Sarah had said during his retirement party in 2016. "I know you could have had a different kind of career if you hadn't been raising me alone." "Raising you was my career," Arthur had replied, meaning every word. "Everything else was just how I paid for the privilege." At 67, Arthur was enjoying retirement in the Boulder home he'd shared with Margaret and Sarah. The house was filled with memories of birthday parties, homework sessions, and bedtime stories that had shaped both their lives. Sarah visited regularly, often staying for dinner and sharing stories about her latest documentary projects. Arthur felt deeply satisfied with the life he'd built and the relationship he maintained with his daughter. He had succeeded as a single father, and Sarah's success validated every sacrifice he'd made. He had no idea that Sarah was about to weaponize his love against him in the most devastating way possible. In March 2021, Sarah arrived at Arthur's house with an excitement he hadn't seen since her college days. She had just received a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts to produce a documentary about successful aging that would challenge stereotypes about elderly isolation and mental decline. "Dad, "I want you to be the centerpiece of this documentary," Sarah explained over dinner, her eyes bright with apparent enthusiasm. "You're the perfect example of someone who's aging gracefully, staying intellectually active, maintaining independence, living life on your own terms." Arthur felt flattered by Sarah's request. After spending his career behind the scenes, supporting Sarah's ambitions, the opportunity to be featured in her work felt like recognition of their shared success. "What would the documentary involve?" Arthur asked. "I'd film you over several months, documenting your daily routines, your hobbies, your social activities. The goal is to show audiences that aging doesn't mean decline. It can mean wisdom, fulfillment, and continued growth." The project sounded meaningful and important. Arthur had always been passionate about challenging ageism and stereotypes about elderly people's capabilities. "I think it's wonderful that you want to use your talents to fight prejudice against older adults," Arthur said. "Count me in." Over the next few weeks, Sarah explained the scope of the project in more detail. She would be filming Arthur's daily activities, conducting interviews about his life philosophy, and documenting his routines to show how retirees could maintain purpose and vitality. "The filming will be very natural and unobtrusive," Sarah assured him. "I want to capture authentic moments, not staged performances. Just live your normal life and I'll document the reality of successful aging." Arthur agreed enthusiastically. He was proud of the life he'd built and happy to help Sarah create work that might inspire other families to appreciate their elderly members' value and wisdom. Sarah began filming in April 2021, arriving at Arthur's house several mornings each week with professional camera equipment and audio recording devices. She filmed Arthur reading in his study, working in his garden, cooking meals, and engaging in his daily routines. "This is perfect, Dad," Sarah would say as she captured footage of Arthur organizing his books or preparing his morning coffee. "You're showing people that retirement can be active and fulfilling." Arthur enjoyed the attention and felt pride in contributing to Sarah's important work. The documentary would showcase positive aging while advancing Sarah's career. Exactly the kind of mutually beneficial project that made their relationship special. But as filming continued, Arthur began noticing subtle changes in Sarah's approach that made him uncomfortable. After 2 months of filming, Arthur started noticing that Sarah's documentary techniques were becoming increasingly intrusive and manipulative. She would arrive early in the morning when Arthur was still groggy, filming him before he was fully alert and oriented. "Sarah, I haven't had my coffee yet," Arthur would protest when she started recording at 7 a.m. "Can we wait until I'm more awake?" "Dad, this is authentic footage," Sarah would reply, continuing to film. "I need to show all aspects of your daily experience, not just the polished moments." She also began asking leading questions designed to elicit responses that could be misinterpreted. During one filmed interview, Sarah asked Arthur about his memory and cognitive function in ways that seemed designed to highlight normal, age-related changes. "Dad, do you ever forget things more often than you used to?" Sarah asked, camera rolling. "Well, everyone becomes a bit more forgetful with age," Arthur replied honestly. "I might need to write down grocery lists now, whereas I used to remember everything mentally." "What about confusion? Do you ever feel disoriented or uncertain about things that used to be automatic?" Arthur felt uncomfortable with the question's implication. "Sarah, normal aging involves some changes, but I'm certainly not confused or disoriented. My mind is as sharp as it's ever been." But Sarah edited the footage to remove his clarifications, keeping only his acknowledgement of minor memory changes while eliminating his assertions about mental sharpness. The most troubling development was Sarah's habit of filming Arthur during stressful or challenging moments. When Arthur received a frustrating call from his insurance company about a billing dispute, Sarah captured his irritation and confusion about bureaucratic procedures. "Dad, can you walk me through what just happened with that phone call?" Sarah asked, camera focused on Arthur's frustrated expression. "It's just insurance nonsense," Arthur said, still annoyed. "These companies make everything unnecessarily complicated." "But you seemed confused about the details they were asking for." "I wasn't confused. I was irritated that they wanted information I didn't have readily available. There's a difference between confusion and frustration." Again, Sarah's editing removed Arthur's explanations while emphasizing moments where he appeared uncertain or stressed. By summer 2021, Arthur realized that Sarah's successful aging documentary was becoming something entirely different. Instead of showcasing his vitality and independence, she seemed focused on capturing footage that could be interpreted as evidence of cognitive decline. "Sarah, I'm concerned about the direction this documentary is taking," Arthur said during one filming session. "It feels like you're looking for problems rather than successes." "Dad, authentic documentary work has to show the complete picture," Sarah replied. "If I only filmed your best moments, audiences would think I was hiding something." But Arthur's professor instincts told him that Sarah's approach was neither balanced nor authentic. She was systematically documenting his worst moments, while ignoring evidence of his continued competence and vitality. Arthur decided to pay closer attention to Sarah's filming and editing choices. Arthur's growing suspicions about Sarah's documentary motivations reached a breaking point in August 2021 when he accidentally discovered footage she had filmed without his knowledge. Sarah had left her laptop open in Arthur's kitchen while taking a phone call, and the screen displayed a video editing program with hours of recorded footage. What Arthur saw on that screen horrified him. Sarah had been filming him secretly, using hidden cameras throughout his house, capturing private moments when he believed he was alone and unobserved. The footage included Arthur talking to himself while cooking, a completely normal behavior that Sarah had captured to make him appear to be having conversations with imaginary people. She had filmed him searching for his reading glasses, editing the footage to make a 30-second search appear like extended confusion and disorientation. Most disturbing, Sarah had recorded Arthur during phone conversations with friends and family, capturing only his responses to create footage that made him appear to be having incoherent, one-sided conversations with no context. This isn't a documentary about successful aging, Arthur realized with growing horror. This is a documentary designed to make me appear demented. Arthur quietly closed Sarah's laptop and spent the afternoon processing what he'd discovered. His daughter wasn't creating inspiring content about positive aging. She was systematically building evidence of mental decline that could be used against him in legal proceedings. That evening, Arthur confronted Sarah directly about the hidden cameras and secret filming. "Sarah, I saw the footage on your laptop," Arthur said calmly. "You've been filming me without permission, editing conversations out of context, and creating a false narrative about my mental state." Sarah's expression shifted from surprise to defensive anger. "Dad, you're being paranoid. This is standard documentary technique, capturing natural behavior without the artificiality of performed scenes." "Filming someone without their consent isn't documentary technique, Sarah. It's surveillance. And editing footage to misrepresent someone's mental state isn't artistic license. It's fraud." "Dad, I think you're overreacting because you don't understand how filmmaking works." Arthur looked at his daughter with the cold, analytical gaze that had made him effective in academic debates for 4 decades. "Sarah, I've taught media literacy for 20 years. I understand exactly how filmmaking works. The question is why you're using those techniques to make your father appear mentally incompetent." Sarah's defensive posture collapsed slightly, and Arthur caught a glimpse of calculation in her eyes that chilled him to the bone. "I need to know what this documentary is really for," Arthur said quietly, "and I need to know right now." Sarah's explanation of the documentary's true purpose revealed a betrayal so comprehensive that Arthur struggled to process its implications. The successful aging documentary was actually evidence being compiled for legal proceedings to have Arthur declared mentally incompetent and placed under guardianship. "Dad, I've been talking to lawyers about your future care needs," Sarah said, abandoning any pretense of concern for documentary authenticity. "You're 67 years old, living alone, and showing signs of cognitive decline that could become dangerous." "What signs of cognitive decline?" Arthur demanded. "I'm in excellent physical and mental health. The footage I've gathered shows clear evidence of confusion, disorientation, and memory problems that indicate developing dementia." Arthur felt sick as he realized the scope of Sarah's manipulation. "You created that footage by filming me secretly, editing conversations out of context, and staging situations designed to make me appear confused." "I documented reality, Dad. You're just not able to recognize your own decline." The gaslighting was breathtaking. Sarah was using fabricated evidence to convince Arthur that he was mentally incompetent, while simultaneously preparing to use that same evidence in legal proceedings. "Sarah, what is the real reason you want me declared incompetent?" Sarah hesitated, and Arthur saw the calculation return to her expression. Dad, you've accumulated significant assets over your career. If something happens to you, if you develop serious dementia or need long-term care, those assets could be lost to medical expenses or poor financial decisions. So you want to control my assets to protect them? I want to ensure your estate is managed responsibly for your benefit and properly preserved for inheritance. Arthur felt the ground shift beneath him as he understood Sarah's true motivations. This wasn't about protecting him from cognitive decline. It was about gaining control of his $2.8 million estate while he was still alive. Sarah, you're planning to steal my life savings while I'm still competent enough to know what you're doing. I'm planning to protect your legacy and ensure you receive appropriate care as your condition deteriorates. My condition isn't deteriorating, and you know it. You've been manufacturing evidence of decline to justify taking legal control of my finances. The conversation continued for 2 hours, with Sarah alternating between fake concern for Arthur's welfare and barely concealed frustration that her plan had been discovered. Arthur realized that his daughter had been planning this betrayal for months, possibly years. "How long have you been planning this?" Arthur asked. "Since you retired. Dad, you're sitting on nearly $3 million while living like a hermit. Those assets should be managed professionally and used to ensure your long-term security." Arthur understood that Sarah's definition of professional management meant her control, and her concept of long-term security included securing her own inheritance while Arthur was still alive to provide it. "Sorry, point to ask you once to destroy this footage and abandon whatever legal proceedings you're planning." "Dad, I can't let you destroy your own future because you're too proud to accept help." Arthur looked at his daughter, the child he'd raised alone, the woman he'd sacrificed his career to support, the filmmaker he'd been so proud to call his daughter, and realized she had become his greatest threat. "Then you've made your choice," Arthur said quietly, "and now I'll make mine." Arthur approached his counterattack against Sarah's conspiracy with the same systematic methodology he'd used in academic research for 4 decades. If Sarah was building a legal case based on fabricated evidence, Arthur would build his own case based on authentic documentation of her fraud. His first step was securing legal counsel. Arthur contacted Jennifer Walsh, an elder law attorney who specialized in defending against fraudulent guardianship proceedings. Attorney Walsh's initial assessment was grimly realistic. "Professor Henderson, if your daughter has months of video footage showing apparent cognitive decline, that evidence could be very persuasive to a court," Walsh explained during their consultation. "Judges and juries tend to trust documentary evidence, especially when it appears to show systematic patterns of confusion or disorientation." "But the footage has been edited and manipulated to misrepresent my actual mental state," Arthur protested. "Proving that manipulation will require expert testimony and technical analysis. More importantly, we need to demonstrate your actual competence through comprehensive evaluation and documentation." Arthur agreed to undergo extensive neurological and psychological testing to establish his mental competence officially. The results confirmed what he already knew. His cognitive function was excellent for his age, with no signs of dementia or significant decline. "Your test results place you in the top 10% of cognitive function for your age group," explained Dr. Patricia Rodriguez, the neuropsychologist who conducted Arthur's evaluation. "There's no evidence of dementia, confusion, or any impairment that would affect your decision-making capacity." Armed with professional medical documentation of his competence, Arthur began the more difficult task of gathering evidence of Sarah's fraudulent documentation and conspiracy to steal his estate. Arthur hired a private investigator, Michael Torres, who specialized in elder abuse cases and had experience with family financial exploitation. "Professor Henderson, what you're describing is a sophisticated fraud scheme," Torres explained after reviewing Arthur's situation. "Your daughter has been creating false evidence to support a legal proceeding designed to steal your assets. This isn't just family manipulation, it's criminal behavior." Torres began investigating Sarah's activities, financial situation, and any associates who might be helping with the guardianship conspiracy. What he discovered revealed that Arthur's case wasn't isolated. Private investigator Torres's investigation into Sarah's activities revealed that she was part of a larger criminal network specializing in fraudulent guardianship proceedings against elderly parents. The scheme involved corrupt attorneys, complicit medical professionals, and family members willing to destroy their relatives for financial gain. Professor Henderson, your daughter has been working with attorney Patricia Stevens and psychiatrist Dr. Marcus Whitfield, Torres reported. They've processed at least 12 similar cases over the past 3 years, using fabricated evidence to gain guardianship over elderly individuals with significant assets. The network's methodology was sophisticated and systematic. Family members would document elderly relatives using hidden cameras and manipulative editing to create evidence of cognitive decline. Dr. Whitfield would then provide psychiatric evaluations supporting incompetency declarations without conducting proper examinations. Attorney Stevens would file guardianship petitions using the fabricated evidence to gain control of victims' assets. The average victim loses between $500,000 and $2 million in assets, Torres explained. The family member receives a portion of the stolen assets, while the professionals collect fees for their services. Meanwhile, the victim is placed in managed care facilities and loses all independence and financial control. Arthur realized that Sarah's betrayal was even more devastating than he'd initially understood. She wasn't just stealing his money, she was participating in a criminal enterprise that had destroyed dozens of families. How do these criminals avoid prosecution? Arthur asked. The system is designed to protect elderly people from exploitation, but these criminals have learned to exploit the system itself, Torres explained. Judges and social workers want to believe that families are protecting their elderly relatives, so they rarely question evidence that supports guardianship petitions. But Torres had also discovered a critical vulnerability in the criminal network's operations. Their success depended on victims being isolated and unable to defend themselves effectively. Arthur's academic background and analytical skills made him a more dangerous target than they'd anticipated. Professor Henderson, most victims don't recognize what's happening until they've already lost legal control of their assets, Torres said. You identified the scheme early enough to fight back effectively. Arthur decided to use his advantages, education, resources, and early detection, to not only protect himself but also expose the criminal network and protect other potential victims. Arthur's strategy for defeating Sarah's conspiracy required gathering irrefutable evidence of her fraud, while documenting the criminal network's operations. Working with investigator Torres and attorney Walsh, Arthur developed a comprehensive plan to expose the scheme. The first component was documenting Sarah's manipulation techniques through controlled interactions. Arthur agreed to continue participating in Sarah's filming while secretly recording their conversations to capture her admissions about editing footage and manufacturing evidence. Sarah, I've been thinking about our conversation last week, Arthur said during a recorded session. Can you explain how the documentary will be used in the legal proceedings you mentioned? Dad, the footage provides objective documentation of your cognitive decline. When Dr. Whitfield evaluates you for competency, he'll have visual evidence to support his medical assessment. Arthur captured Sarah admitting that the documentary was coordinated with Dr. Whitfield's evaluation and intended for legal proceedings rather than public education. The second component involved technical analysis of Sarah's editing techniques. Arthur hired digital forensics expert Dr. Jennifer Kim to examine the documentary footage and identify manipulation, deceptive editing, and fabricated evidence. Professor Henderson, this footage has been extensively manipulated, Dr. Kim reported after analyzing Sarah's work. Conversations have been edited out of context, timestamps have been altered, and multiple recording sessions have been combined to create false sequences that misrepresent your actual behavior. Dr. Kim's analysis provided frame-by-frame documentation of Sarah's fraud techniques, creating evidence that could be presented in court to demonstrate the fabricated nature of the documentary. The third component focused on exposing the criminal network's operations. Investigator Torres worked with federal authorities to document the conspiracy between Sarah, attorney Stevens, and psychiatrist Whitfield. We've been monitoring communications between the conspirators, Torres reported. Sarah has been coordinating with Stevens and Whitfield to schedule your competency evaluation and prepare the guardianship petition. They've discussed how to maximize asset recovery and minimize the risk of exposure. The evidence-gathering process took 4 months, but by December 2021, Arthur had assembled a comprehensive case demonstrating Sarah's fraud and the criminal network's operations. Arthur was ready to turn the tables on the people who had tried to destroy his independence and steal his life's work. Arthur's confrontation with Sarah occurred on a cold December morning in 2021, when Sarah arrived to film what she expected to be additional evidence of his cognitive decline. Instead, Arthur presented her with documentation of her fraud and gave her one final opportunity to abandon the conspiracy. "Sarah, sit down," Arthur said calmly, gesturing to the kitchen table where they'd shared thousands of meals during her childhood. "We need to have an honest conversation about your documentary project." Sarah set up her camera equipment, apparently unaware that this filming session would be different from all the others. "Of course, Dad. Are you feeling ready to continue with the interviews?" Arthur placed a manila folder on the table and opened it to reveal screenshots from Sarah's edited footage side by side with unedited versions of the same scenes. "Sarah, this is evidence of how you've been manipulating footage to make me appear confused and disoriented," Arthur said, his voice steady but cold. "You've edited conversations out of context, combined multiple recording sessions to create false sequences, and used hidden cameras to capture private moments that you've misrepresented as signs of dementia." Sarah's expression shifted from confusion to alarm as she recognized her own deceptive editing techniques displayed as evidence against her. "Dad, I don't understand what you're trying to show me." Arthur opened a second folder containing transcripts of recorded conversations where Sarah discussed coordinating the documentary with legal proceedings. "These are recordings of you admitting that this documentary is being created as evidence for guardianship proceedings, not as educational content about successful aging," Arthur continued. "You've been building a false case to have me declared incompetent so you can control my assets." Sarah's camera continued rolling, capturing her own shock and fear as Arthur systematically destroyed her conspiracy. "Sarah, I know about Patricia Stevens, Dr. Marcus Whitfield, and the criminal network you're working with," Arthur said, opening a third folder. "I know about the 12 other elderly victims they've defrauded using the same techniques you've used against me." Sarah finally found her voice. "Dad, you're paranoid. You're seeing conspiracies that don't exist. This is exactly the kind of confused thinking that proves you need professional help." Arthur looked directly into Sarah's camera as he delivered his final statement. "Sarah, this conversation is being recorded by your own equipment and by my security system. You've just attempted to gaslight me by claiming that documented evidence of your fraud is actually evidence of my confusion. That admission will be presented to prosecutors, along with all the other evidence of your criminal conspiracy." Arthur stood up slowly, feeling every one of his 67 years, but also feeling more mentally sharp than he had in months. "You have 24 hours to contact Patricia Stevens and Dr. Whitfield and inform them that you're withdrawing from their criminal scheme. If you don't, I'll be filing criminal charges against all of you for elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy." Sarah left Arthur's house that morning, knowing that her attempt to steal his estate had not only failed, but had provided him with evidence to destroy her life and career. Sarah's choice to continue with the guardianship conspiracy despite Arthur's warning led to swift and decisive legal consequences. When she failed to withdraw from the scheme within Arthur's deadline, he immediately contacted federal authorities and provided evidence of the criminal network's operations. FBI Elder Abuse Task Force agent Patricia Martinez reviewed Arthur's evidence and confirmed that he had documented one of the most sophisticated elderly fraud schemes the Bureau had encountered. "Professor Henderson, your evidence is exceptionally thorough and well organized," Agent Martinez said during their initial meeting. "You've essentially conducted a professional investigation that provides everything we need for prosecution." Federal authorities moved quickly to arrest Sarah, Attorney Stevens, and psychiatrist Whitfield before they could destroy evidence or alert other victims. The coordinated arrests occurred simultaneously on a Tuesday morning in January 2022. "Sarah Henderson, you're under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering," FBI agents announced as they arrested Sarah at her apartment. The evidence Arthur had gathered was overwhelming. Hours of Sarah's own footage showing her manipulation techniques, recorded conversations where she admitted to coordinating with corrupt professionals, technical analysis proving the documentary's fraudulent editing, and financial records documenting the criminal network's previous victims. During Sarah's trial 6 months later, Arthur testified about the systematic way she had exploited their father-daughter relationship to build a false case against his mental competence. "Sarah used my love and trust as weapons against me," Arthur told the jury. "She knew that I would agree to participate in any project that might advance her career, and she used that knowledge to gain access to my home, my personal information, and my most private moments." The prosecution presented Arthur's documentary evidence alongside testimony from other victims who had lost their homes, their independence, and their life savings to the same criminal network. The defendants didn't just steal money, prosecutor James Rodriguez argued. They stole their victims' dignity, independence, and family relationships while pretending to provide protection and care. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts against all 3 defendants. Sarah Henderson was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $340,000 in restitution to victims of the criminal network. Attorney Stevens received 12 years and lost her legal license permanently. Dr. Whitfield was sentenced to 10 years and had his medical license permanently revoked. The criminal prosecution of Sarah provided Arthur with legal justice, but the personal reckoning with his daughter's betrayal required a different kind of resolution. During Sarah's sentencing hearing, Arthur addressed the court and his daughter directly for the final time. "Your Honor, Sarah Henderson is my daughter, and I raised her alone from age 8 after her mother died," Arthur said, looking at Sarah across the courtroom. "I sacrificed my career advancement, my social life, and my personal opportunities to ensure she had every advantage I could provide." Sarah sat quietly at the defendant's table, no longer the confident filmmaker who had tried to manipulate her father's love into a weapon against him. "I paid for her education, supported her career, and gave her unconditional love for 35 years, Arthur continued. "In return, she tried to steal my independence, my assets, and my dignity by creating fraudulent evidence that I was mentally incompetent." Arthur paused, gathering himself for the most difficult words he would ever speak about his child. "The woman sitting at that defendant's table isn't the daughter I raised. The daughter I raised would never have betrayed the man who devoted his life to her success. I don't know who this person became or how my love failed so completely." Arthur's statement captured the devastating personal cost of family betrayal that extended far beyond financial losses. "Sarah's crimes destroyed our relationship, but they also revealed strength and resilience I didn't know I possessed. At 67 years old, I learned to fight back against people I trusted completely, and I discovered that age doesn't make you vulnerable. It makes you wise enough to recognize manipulation and strong enough to defeat it." After Sarah's sentencing, Arthur made the difficult decision to sever all contact with his daughter. The betrayal had been too systematic and calculating to forgive, and Arthur needed to protect himself from further manipulation. "I grieved for my daughter the same way I grieved for my wife," Arthur reflected months later. "Sarah died for me when she chose to become a criminal who preyed on her father's love." Arthur's experience with Sarah's conspiracy led him to become a national advocate for elderly rights and protection from family financial exploitation. His academic background and systematic documentation skills made him uniquely effective at educating others about recognizing and fighting elder abuse. Most elderly parents never imagine that their own children might exploit their trust for financial gain, Arthur explained during his first presentation to the National Association of Elder Law Attorneys. "The betrayal is so profound that many victims can't believe it's happening even when presented with clear evidence." Arthur developed educational programs that taught elderly individuals how to recognize signs of family financial exploitation and document evidence that could be used for protection and prosecution. The programs included identifying manipulation techniques used by family members seeking financial control, documenting conversations and activities that might be used as fabricated evidence of incompetence, understanding legal rights and protections available to elderly individuals, building support networks that could provide assistance during exploitation attempts. Arthur Henderson's educational work has prevented dozens of similar cases, reported Elder Rights Coalition Director Margaret Foster. His systematic approach to recognizing and fighting family exploitation has become the gold standard for elder protection advocacy. Arthur also worked with federal authorities to identify other victims of family financial exploitation and testify in prosecutions of similar criminal networks. Professor Henderson's expertise in analyzing fraudulent documentation has been invaluable for prosecuting complex elder abuse cases, explained FBI Agent Martinez. His academic background gives him credibility with juries and judges that help secure convictions. Over 3 years, Arthur's advocacy work contributed to the prosecution of more than 20 family members who had exploited elderly relatives, recovering millions of dollars in stolen assets and preventing countless additional cases. "Every family I help protect makes Sarah's betrayal serve a positive purpose," Arthur reflected. "She tried to destroy me, but instead she gave me a mission that's helped protect hundreds of other elderly parents." Arthur's victory over Sarah's conspiracy created lasting changes in elder protection and inspired hundreds of other elderly individuals to recognize and fight family exploitation. The Henderson Foundation became a national model for elder advocacy, with Arthur personally helping prosecute over 40 similar cases. Professor Henderson's systematic approach to documenting family fraud has revolutionized elder protection, explained FBI Elder Abuse Director Patricia Chen. His methods have prevented millions in losses and empowered elderly individuals nationwide. Arthur also found personal healing through relationships with other elder abuse survivors, and eventually began dating Margaret Wilson, a retired librarian who understood his experience with family betrayal. Arthur showed me that it's possible to rebuild trust after devastating betrayal, Margaret explained. His strength inspired me to become more confident about protecting myself and others. The Henderson Protocol was adopted by courts nationwide, requiring independent analysis of documentary evidence, incompetency evaluations, and mandatory second opinions for guardianship proceedings involving significant assets. 3 years after Sarah's conviction, Arthur participated in a legitimate documentary about elder abuse that won multiple awards and became required viewing in elder law programs. The irony isn't lost on me, Arthur reflected. Sarah tried to use documentary techniques to destroy me, and now I'm using a documentary to help protect other elderly people from similar destruction. Today, Arthur Henderson lives independently in his Boulder home, surrounded by the memories of raising Sarah but no longer haunted by her betrayal. At 70, he has transformed one of the most devastating family betrayals imaginable into a foundation for protecting other elderly parents from similar exploitation. The study where Sarah filmed her fraudulent documentary now serves as headquarters for the Henderson Foundation for Elder Protection, where Arthur coordinates advocacy services that have helped more than 300 elderly individuals fight back against family financial exploitation. The space that was meant to provide evidence of his incompetence now houses research that protects elderly people's independence nationwide. Sarah thought my love for her made me an easy target who would never fight back against my own daughter, Arthur reflects. She assumed that a 67-year-old retired professor would be too trusting and too isolated to recognize sophisticated manipulation. But she underestimated what 4 decades of academic research had taught me about analyzing evidence and building systematic arguments. Sarah Henderson remains in federal prison, serving her 8-year sentence with no possibility of early release. The criminal network she participated in was completely dismantled, with dozens of victims receiving restitution and justice. The Henderson Foundation has recovered more than $4.3 million in settlements and donations, funding elder protection services and legal advocacy programs that have prevented hundreds of cases of family financial exploitation. Arthur's documentation and investigation techniques have become standard protocol for elder protection programs nationwide. Arthur Henderson proved that elderly individuals don't have to be passive victims of family exploitation, said FBI Elder Abuse Director Patricia Chen during the Foundation's 4th anniversary celebration. His systematic approach to fighting back has changed how we investigate these crimes and empowered elderly people to protect themselves and others. But perhaps Arthur's greatest victory was personal, proving that family betrayal, no matter how devastating, doesn't have to define your legacy or destroy your future. Sarah's conspiracy taught me that unconditional love can be weaponized against you by people who understand your vulnerabilities, Arthur concluded. But fighting back against her fraud taught me that wisdom, determination, and systematic thinking are more powerful than manipulation and betrayal. She tried to steal my independence, but instead she helped me discover strength I didn't know I possessed. Arthur's restored estate represents more than just recovered assets. It symbolizes the power of refusing to accept other people's definitions of your capabilities or limitations. His ongoing relationship with Margaret and his community of fellow advocates demonstrates that meaningful connections can emerge from shared strength rather than dependency or exploitation. The story of Arthur Henderson proves that family exploitation can be defeated when victims respond with systematic investigation rather than emotional denial. When faced with betrayal by those we love most, we can choose to become advocates who protect others from similar violations while rebuilding our own lives on foundations of wisdom and mutual respect. Arthur's academic expertise became his greatest weapon against the daughter who tried to destroy him. But his transformation from victim to advocate has created protection for thousands of elderly people who now understand they don't have to accept exploitation from anyone, including their own children. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Remember, unconditional love should inspire protection, not enable exploitation. And age brings wisdom that can defeat even the most sophisticated manipulation when applied systematically and courageously. As I finish telling you Arthur Henderson's story, I want you to understand something that should terrify every parent who has ever sacrificed for their children's future. Arthur's experience represents a growing epidemic of adult children weaponizing the very love and sacrifice that enabled their success to destroy their parents' independence and steal their life's work. Every month since Arthur's case became public, I receive messages from viewers sharing similar experiences. Adult children suggesting their parents are declining when they're perfectly competent. Family members wanting to help manage elderly relatives' finances. Sons and daughters creating false narratives of confusion to justify controlling assets they expect to inherit anyway. What makes Arthur's story remarkable isn't that his daughter betrayed him. It's that Arthur had the analytical skills and determination to recognize sophisticated manipulation and fight back systematically. Most parents never imagine their own children could exploit their trust so completely. Arthur Henderson's academic background gave him advantages that most elder abuse victims don't have, explains Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who researches family financial exploitation. He understood documentary manipulation and systematic evidence gathering in ways that enabled him to build an effective defense. But Arthur's story teaches lessons any parent can apply. The importance of questioning family members who seem overly interested in financial affairs. The value of maintaining independence regardless of family pressure. The power of documentation when relationships become suspicious. Consider how Sarah's scheme operated for months before discovery. She used professional filmmaking techniques to create false evidence while exploiting Arthur's pride in her career and desire to support her success. Family financial exploitation has become extremely sophisticated, explains FBI Elder Abuse Director Patricia Chen. Criminals like Sarah understand how to exploit parental love while creating documentation that appears legitimate to legal professionals. Arthur's systematic response created a template other parents can follow, but it revealed how much individual strength is required to challenge family members who exploit institutional bias toward believing families always act in elderly relatives' best interests. The most important lesson from Arthur's experience isn't about documentary fraud specifically, it's about maintaining critical thinking and independence even with family members who have earned trust through decades of positive history. Arthur transformed his daughter's betrayal into protection for hundreds of other parents, but every elderly individual can apply his systematic approach to maintaining independence and identifying family manipulation before it destroys their security and dignity. Remember, the love you gave your children was meant to strengthen them for independent lives, not enable them to exploit your trust when you become vulnerable. Age brings wisdom that includes recognizing when love is being used as a weapon against you.